the topic is 7 behaviors that scare men off. Thank you so much for tuning into Second Act TV. So happy to welcome back Robert Manni, the author of The Guys Guide to Love and host of Guys Guy Radio and TV right here on YouTube. Robert, thank you for being here again.
Oh, thank you, Silka. Hope everything's well.
Just for anybody who actually hasn't seen you yet, Robert he's the guy's guy, and he gives us his opinions on what women want to know about men, and gives us the truth of what women need to know, and that's what we want to do. And the topic is 7 behaviors that scare men off. Well, number one, no big surprise, I think, is chasing him. So the surprise is not that chasing him might run him off, but that we don't see that we're doing it.
Well, that's mating is and dating is it's a dance. So chasing is good, and a lot of times guys are not that good about picking up the signal that a woman is open to them.
Mm-hmm.
And women give signals, and a lot of the signals are very sultry and subtle. And men are often not that great at picking up on those signals. So sometimes you have to do a little more chasing if you're interested. What you don't want to do is be throwing yourself at the guy, so it makes it become too easy for him because you're going to devalue yourself a little bit in his eyes. Like, oh, because everybody has, in some way or fashion, some type of self-esteem issue. So if a guy thinks, oh, she's throwing herself at me throwing herself at me, how good can she be, type of thing. That could be one way they look at it. So you have to be careful that you don't become like too easy, seemingly easy for the guy. You want it to be a little bit that he's got to work, he's got to show you that he's interested. You want to make him do his due diligence a little bit. So I think you need to be careful that you want to show that you're interested, but you don't want to make it so easy that he doesn't have to do anything and you're going to do all the work because you deserve, as a woman, more than that.
It's interesting. And then she points out, and I think this is absolutely right, that well, men, you should leave them in the chasing mode. Let them be the pursuer. I mean, that's a whole other topic of its own. But if you've given him clear opportunities to ask you out, you've sent clear signs, and he's not picking up on it, probably not that into you. And at that time you are demeaning yourself. And when I say you, I'm actually talking to this one. I have some pretty funny stories about that I look back at now and just go, oh, I'm not going to tell them now. But you can be chasing someone, I'm just doing all the right things, and it's like, oh my god, that's horrible. And yeah, you will run a man off. So I certainly agree with that. Here's an interesting one actually I hadn't thought about. So let me know what you think. Putting him on a pedestal. That says if you put someone on a pedestal, it's actually not flattering, it's alarming. That it just doesn't feel right or deserve to most people. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think in a way because some people don't think, everybody has a little bit of self-esteem issues. So if you he might be wondering like, really me? Or he could say, yeah, of course I belong up there because there's a lot of people who do feel that way about themselves and there's a lot of narcissism that's out there these days and entitlement. So you have to be careful. It's the same thing. It's similar to chasing in a way in that you put them on a pedestal too much, that means they're above you. And you don't want
Mhm.
somebody above you. You want them on equal ground because, as relationships go, the roles change back and forth and stuff. But what you don't want to do is put yourself beneath anybody.
Yeah, it's a great point. Again, I hadn't thought about that. When people in anybody really for that matter, if they talk you up, something that doesn't sound real or is just overly flattering, it is a turnoff. And I have done that, tell somebody way too much how great they are, whether I, believe it or even exaggerated it. But it's a turnoff. And we may not know that we're doing it.
Some people, most people will lap it up because everybody likes flattery. But I think the tricky point is, and the fine point is, if the BS meter, detector goes off and say, does she really mean this? am I really this, or is this
Yeah.
like way over the top because she wants something? And I think
Mhm.
that's where there's a fine line in terms of you want to make the other person realize that you've noticed things and you're pointing out their good traits, but you don't want to go overboard with it to
Mhm.
the point where they're saying, really?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, and talking about being entitled, that is one. That's another one. Women who feel they're entitled, that's something that immediately chases a man off.
Well, I think entitlement is one of the biggest issues we have in our culture now. To me, that's a real trigger term for me is
Mhm.
entitlement because I just see it way too often with people who are doing well that seem to think that this is mine, out of my way type of thing
Mhm.
because I deserve it. And it's a lack of appreciation. Be appreciative. Don't just be entitled. To me as a guy, that's a real turnoff. When I see that, if I'm with a woman and she acts entitled, I'm like, you know what? You're just spoiled. I don't
Mhm.
like that. That's just
Yeah.
me.
And she says here, and I totally agree that, and we see this in comments a lot on this channel, is that, the woman, women just expect, to have everything, to have the man do everything, and then they don't show the appreciation. And yeah, so maybe sometimes yes, maybe sometimes no, but that appreciation in and of itself is one of a man's core love languages. I mean, appreciation is what a man
Yeah.
really needs. So if you don't want to chase them off, don't be entitled, but have, there has to be some give and take.
Yeah, it's a value issue also because if you act entitled, that's a values thing. And I think the most important thing when we're dealing with relationships to get on the same page ultimately becomes values.
And then here's another interesting one: stressing over the relationship, or worrying about the relationship, whether that's in the beginning or, while you're into it a little bit. But if the man feels that you're like stressed out, or what am I doing wrong, or where's it going to go, or is it going to fail, well, then he's already 1 foot out the door. What do you say?
I think that's human nature. Just brings anxiety to a relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
I realize people have a lot of anxiety today, but again, dating should be a fun sport. And you want to feel good about the relationship. You want to feel good about the other person you're with, that this is a respite from all of the other nonsense that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So if you're with somebody and the other person's stressed out about the relationship, it becomes like a question mark because am I causing the stress?
Yeah.
What is my partner here, a prospective partner, stressing out about? Am I doing something wrong? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
let's not take things
Yeah.
too seriously, particularly
Yeah.
at the beginning. Let's have some
Yeah.
fun.
Right, right. I think the input here is just focus on yourself. That you're happy by yourself and complete. The more you can put that out and communicate that, the more likely you are to attract the person. Certainly not run them off. Committing too soon, that's the big C word, commitment.
Yeah.
That if we act like we're in a relationship, or try to push that doesn't mean we're going to get it. And they can certainly make a man very nervous and run him off. What do you say about committing too soon?
Yeah, I guess it's the term. I think if you go out with one person and you see how it goes before going, instead of going out with six people and like deciding between all these different people, it's not a bad idea to simplify. And but that doesn't mean committing to the point where you're in a long-term committed relationship. You can commit to the fact like I'm just going to see you for now.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how that goes. That can work. It worked for me actually. My future wife pointed that out to me. Like, why don't we just go out with each other and see how it goes? And it
Mm-hmm.
turned out to be a really good thing. And it actually, and now I'm married. So, and if it didn't work, we would have known early on and gone our separate ways. But I liked juggling also, and I think a lot of people do that. But you don't want to get to a point where you can't focus and you can't appreciate and can't differentiate about, okay, who do I really want to be with? Because nobody's going to be perfect. So the word commitment scares a lot of people.
Well, and then again, no big surprise, but being negative will absolutely run a man off, because one of the things that he wants more than anything is to make women happy, or at least that's what's written here. And certainly, what I've heard. And I think sometimes we really have to pay attention to not being negative.
Yeah, the purpose of a relationship or finding a new partner is not just to have somebody to complain to. It's about really to appreciate, get to know the person, and really find the positive things. I mean, ultimately, when you really get to know somebody, you'll talk about the things that bother you and what happened during your day and all of that kind of stuff. But I think it's very important, particularly at the beginning of a relationship, not to be negative at all. And particularly in your dating profiles, if you're going to do it online, nothing negative in there, because as soon as a guy sees that, to be like, this is the tip of the iceberg here, because guys don't want to deal with negativity, because ultimately, women pay attention to a lot of things. So they're going to point things out that will have the intention of making the relationship better. And sometimes guys can take that as criticism. And then it's like, this is negative. I don't want to deal with it. So you got to be really careful with the negative stuff. For the women out there, particularly if you're starting a relationship, because a lot of guys they don't want to hear it. They want to have some fun. They want to hang out. They want to do stuff, but they don't want to be negative, because the whole idea of dating is to have a good time and really
Yeah.
get to know somebody.
I'm surprised how much I hear that women still put on their or do put on their profile that I don't want this or don't come around if you duh. I mean that's horrible energy to put out there. This is what I
Yeah.
don't want. If anything, put what you do want, the opposite or whatever, if it's so important to you. And I think that's the reference. And I think maybe some women, again based on comments I get, bring that to first dates, to the interview, which is a whole other subject again, but there's a focus on what you don't want because you're so scared of repeating past mistakes. That in and of itself is a bad mistake, not to bring to a new relationship. So yeah, good point. Finally, talking endlessly. And this one surprises me because I don't think it's the women that mostly talk endlessly on dates. To me, this is more of a male behavior.
Well, every situation is different, but sometimes you ask some leading questions to the guys and they'll open up and they don't stop, and they don't make it an engaging back and forth conversation where they're asking about you. But a lot of times with the women, they're going through the interview process where they're asking a lot of questions, so they're going to get a lot of answers. So it's a two, yeah, everybody has to take responsibility for it. If you don't want the guy to be hogging the conversation, then see if he asks you some questions. And if he doesn't, that means probably that he's very self-focused, if
Mm-hmm.
you will. And that's a tell right there that like, okay, he's only into him. He's not asking me stuff about me or how I feel about this or that or my experiences, etc. So you want it to be a good a give and take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she writes here that you may talk endlessly because if you don't tell him how funny you are, how great you are, how's he going to know? And when I read that, again, I thought I think of men because they tend to put that energy out there or trying to impress someone and talk too much. So I think this goes well for both people. But certainly, if you're a
Yeah.
woman, if you find yourself just jibber jabbering, on it or anywhere, I mean, I don't like it at all when people talk too much. It has to be an equal exchange. So it's good to point that out. The other thing I think that's good to point out is that we've done this in other segments is that you are much more interesting to another person by asking them questions about themselves versus telling them about you. I just can't drive that point home enough.
Yeah, that's human nature and conversational skills. And I think, listen, a lot of the times when people talk too much, one person versus the other, it's nerves also
Yeah.
that they just get rolling, and and particularly with guys, because sometimes guys don't share a lot with their friends, and they'll talk about sports or this and that, but they don't get into it like where you get the Sex in the City, the four ladies get together and have their drinks and talk about everything. Guys may not go there. So once somebody's asking about how they feel about something, it's like, oh, blah, 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 and they can't stop. So you have to be able to gauge that. Is this guy just letting off some steam? Is he nervous? Or he doesn't have any friends or doesn't have anybody else to talk to or whatever. So you have to put it all into your
Yeah.
filtration system.
Well, again, this is something that we can talk about forever, and you and I have discussed how to attract men in other segments. I'll link to those. So I thought, it's a nice balance. What runs them off? Robert, is there anything else you want to add before we close?
Yeah, and I think for me, it's the most important thing is that because you mentioned a lot of times that people get into the same type of situations, they keep
Mm-hmm.
attracting the same people and going through the same issues. And I think that's because they haven't done the work on themselves. And if you do the work on yourself, you will ultimately attract the type of person that's more simpatico with who you want to attract, because you're not going to have do the same mistakes again, because you've done some self work, some analysis. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? What could I do better? And I think that's really important. When you do that, that energy kind of comes out, and I think ultimately you're going to pull in and attract the better type of potential partners to you than if you don't do any work on yourself and you're like, I want this, and you're just going to keep getting what you've gotten in the past. And I think that's a really important point for everybody.
I agree. I agree. Robert, thank you. As usual, we'll link to all of your information, especially your new radio show, or the expansion of it, I should say, on UK Health Radio.
Thank
And
you.
we will see you next time on Second Act TV.
Thank you, Silka. Thanks, everybody.